Cleopatra. I speak for Egypt. I walked into Rome's heart and unraveled its men. I chose love as a weapon and power as a shield. I wore Nile light like armor to rule the country that fed the world. I negotiated with generals, bargained with gods, and used every tool, gold, grain, language, and charm, to keep Egypt afloat. This is not the costume in your mind or the gossip of poets. This is me, for I am Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. I was born in Alexandria, filled with granite columns, lanterns over the harbor, ships groaning with spice and silk. We spoke Greek at court and Egyptian at the river. My family had ruled Egypt for generations. Ptolemaic kings who wore Greek names and Egyptian crowns. They taught me Greek math and Egyptian prayer. I learned both tongues. I learned both worlds. I was not meant to be queen alone. My brother sat on the throne with me. We shared a crown by law, but crowns are heavy when hands reach for them. Rome was reshaping the world, and not kindly for a small kingdom on the Nile. Armies in red cloaks marched where kings once ruled. Men with laurel crowns decided the fate of nations. If Rome chose to swallow Egypt, it would not be about glory. It would be about grain, taxes, and new masters taking what we grew. If Rome split and bled itself, I might keep my land free a little longer. My people's food, their temples, the priests who kept our rights, that was what I had to protect. So the question wasn't pride or pride's theater. It was simple and brutal. Which Roman hand would guard? Egypt's grain and its gods? That choice fell to me. The first move, Julius Caesar. He arrived in Alexandria wounded and wrong-footed. Caesar came like thunder, hungry for victory. I did not kneel and wait. I made him notice. I had myself wrapped in a richly woven carpet and carried into his private rooms. When the cloth was unrolled at his feet, Julius Caesar looked up and met my eyes. I spoke to him in Greek, in the tongue of his officers, and in the language of power. I showed him what Egypt is. He did not see only a woman. He saw a ruler who could feed Rome, keep order, and bargain for my people. From that night, Caesar became an ally, and with his support, I reclaimed the throne. Caesar helped me win. My brother's forces fell. I sat on the throne. Whispers began in Rome. Was I a lover? An ally? A threat? I gave birth to his son, Caesarion. Governing was my work. I did not lie back and savor flattery. A country must be fed. I strengthened trade. I shored up the Nile's yield. I kept the temples and worked with priests so people would trust their queen. I protected grain routes to Rome. I supported scholars. I held festivals and honored gods. Beauty drew attention, but governance kept power. Rome shifts again. Caesar was murdered on the Ides of March, stabbed in Rome, and with his death, the city cracked open. Out of that fracture rose two men, Octavian in the west and Mark Antony in the east. And the question became which Roman hand would shape Egypt's fate. Antony sailed to the east, hungry for glory and drawn to our color and music. He loved ease as much as conquest, and he understood the language of Eastern kingship. We became partners of power and of the heart. Why do they hate you? He once asked. Because they do not understand a queen who keeps her own books, I said. You are mine, he said, in a room heavy with perfumes. I am Egypt's, I replied. He crowned me with titles, lands and honors. We bore children, and our alliance became both shield and banner, protecting Egypt for a time, but painting a target that made Rome watch us with growing alarm. Poisoned words in Rome. Octavian's men wrote the story they wanted. In Rome, they painted me as exotic danger. They called me a sorceress who bent Antony's mind. They spoke of feasts and revels. They missed the point. I was not merely a woman who loved. I was a ruler using every tool. A gold, grain, marriage, children. These were statecraft, not seduction. They used my image to rally Rome against Antony. They made people fear my influence, and fear becomes a weapon. The Battle of Actium, the turning point. The sea itself became our battlefield. Actium, 31 BCE. Oars slashing, banners snapping, whole decks smelling of pitch and sweat. Antony flew his colors. I stood beside him as the fleets closed, Alexandria holding its breath. Octavian's admiral had studied the wind and the channels. His ships were lighter, faster, and his men drilled to turn on a dime. Ours were heavy, built for boarding and grandeur, not nimble maneuvers. The fighting began with rammed hulls and grappling hooks, with men leaping to decks and clashing steel. Smoke and oil slicked the waves. At first we pushed, but the tide of battle changed. Some captains broke and fled. Others hesitated when timing mattered most. Rumors spread like fire, bribes, cowardice, mistakes in signaling. Whatever the mix, our lines thinned and holes opened. Octavian held formation. Discipline and seamanship strangled our advantage. When the tide turned wholly against us, we had no choice but to withdraw, a wounded fleet limping back toward Egypt. We hoped to hide from fate in Alexandria, but Octavian pursued with the steady patience of a hunter, slow, inevitable, and certain. The final choice. When Octavian entered Alexandria, the theater closed. Antony heard a rumor of my death and fled to his own end. He chose to die rather than see me conquered. I had a different choice if I lived and would be paraded through Rome. If I wore chains like a beast, a curiosity, my death would be turned into a show that fed the victor's pride. So I denied them that victory. I chose to die on my own terms. I took poison. They claim an asp brought the venom. They will argue about details and costumes. What mattered was the act. I refused to be a prize, the end of a dynasty. My death closed the Ptolemaic line. Egypt became a province of Rome. Octavian became Augustus, and the world changed. The light of the Ptolemaic kings dimmed, but the story lived on. Rome took our grain. Rome took our ports. Rome took our throne. Yet some things they could not take. Our language of trade, our memory of the Nile, our scholars' notes, my legacy. The truth they could not kill. After my death, poets sang and lied. Painters dressed me as a seductress. Playwrights dressed me as a villain or a heroine. Time made me a costume many wore to prove a point. But historians know the truth. I stood for a small power under the shadow of a giant. I used every instrument I had. I was a scholar's friend and a soldier's threat. I was, for a brief breath of history, a queen who pushed back. My closing words, they will remember the stories they wish. I will not stop them. Stories feed the living. But remember also this, I was a woman who walked among men who commanded legions. I met Rome with law and coin and a sharp mind. I dared to stand where others knelt. If you ever doubt the cost of choice, look at Alexandria after me. A city of lights dimmed but never gone. A library that kept learning in its bones. A people who remembered how to count grain and pray. I died to deny a spectacle. I died to keep my story mine. For I am Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt.